In Ohio, Curtis looks at the enormous clouds in the sky while standing in the rain, confused because it seems that instead of water, motor oil is falling. Afterwards, Curtis has breakfast with his wife Samantha and their deaf daughter Han before going to work. Curtis works for a construction company, while Samantha is a homemaker who takes care of Han but also sews items to sell at the local market on Saturdays. That afternoon, Samantha is having fun with some friends at home who have brought their children over to play. One of them notices that Han has picked up a dangerous piece of wood with nails in it, so Samantha has to run to stop her, as shouting warnings obviously doesn't work. Moments later, it starts to rain heavily, so the construction workers have to stop for the day, and the employees go for a drink together at the bar. At home, Samantha teaches Han the sign for storm while watching the rain through the window. After the bar, Curtis drops his colleague and dear friend Dewart at home. They talk for a while, and Dewart says that Curtis is living a wonderful life. However, Curtis admits that things aren't always as nice as they seem. Their conversation is interrupted when Dewart's wife quietly comes out, demanding he come inside. Then Curtis goes home and checks on Han, while Samantha shares that the girl still has difficulty connecting with other children. The next day, Curtis is cleaning up trash so Han doesn't pick up other dangerous things. At that moment, a strong storm appears in the sky, and suddenly, lightning strikes the ground, causing Curtis's dog, Red, to start barking like crazy. When Curtis gets closer to take Han's hand, the dog breaks free from its chain and attacks Curtis, biting his arm fiercely. However, Curtis wakes up in his room because it was another nightmare. During breakfast, Curtis can't stop thinking about how real the dream seemed. He sees Han playing with Red and gets worried, so he pulls her away from the dog. When Samantha asks what's wrong, Curtis loses his patience and leaves without touching his breakfast. Later at work, Curtis is still distracted and can't stop looking at his arm during a meeting, thinking he still feels the pain. The boss, Jim, is angry about the delay caused by the rain and wants them to make up for the lost time today. On the way to the site, Curtis asks Dewart to help him pick up some extra supplies first. Later, Curtis takes a break and sees a flock of black birds in the sky flying in strange patterns. He asks Dewart if it seems strange to him, but Dewart didn't see anything. Due to the overtime spent catching up on work, Curtis arrives late to the parent-teacher meeting at Han's school. He is also covered in mud because he couldn't take a shower. They learn more about sign language, which is essential for their daughter and which Curtis needs to practice more. Since he doesn't spend as much time with Han as Samantha does, he still doesn't know enough words. Sometime later, it's raining again, and Curtis rushes to get into the car with his daughter. The rain makes it hard to see, and they end up crashing. Curtis's head is bleeding, but Han is fine. At that moment, men appear outside the car and start breaking the windows. One holds Curtis while the other pulls the girl out. Suddenly, Curtis wakes up screaming, realizing it was another dream. He then goes downstairs, looking quite sick. Samantha notices and gets worried, but Curtis promises it's just a cold and tells her to go to the market with Han. While Samantha sells her products and argues with customers over prices, Curtis takes the extra supplies he got from work and builds a fence around the doghouse, enclosing Red in it and apologizing to the poor dog. He should be working on cleaning up the trash, but gets distracted by a door leading to a storm shelter. Curtis looks for the key in an old jar and manages to open it. He then descends to consider a new idea. Later that night, Samantha puts away the money she earned at the market along with their vacation savings. She asks Curtis why Red is outside now, but Curtis gives her a vague answer. Samantha tries again, but Curtis ignores her to listen to the news, where they are talking about a gas leak that affected a small family. This fuels Curtis's paranoia. The next day, Curtis finds Han looking at the storm through the window. When he approaches, he is startled to see a man outside looking at them. Curtis immediately grabs Han in his arms and runs to hide as the man starts trying to open the door. Suddenly, the whole building begins to shake, and all the objects in the living room levitate while Curtis has difficulty breathing. Then, everything falls, and Curtis gasps as he wakes up from another nightmare. To his surprise, he has wet the bed. When Samantha comes in, he covers the accident with the sheets. Curtis asks for the doctor's number, and Samantha tries to check on him out of concern, but Curtis pushes her away so she won't see the wet sheets. He immediately apologizes for his outburst, blaming it on feeling sick, but still tells her to go to church because he can take care of Han. After Samantha leaves, Curtis changes the sheets and washes the evidence. Later, Curtis takes Han to the library and distracts her with a children's book while he looks for information on mental illnesses. On the way back, they stop at a grocery store to buy a lot of canned food. This makes them late for lunch with Han's family, who judge him for skipping church. In the afternoon, Curtis starts cleaning the storm shelter and stocks all the canned food he brought for emergencies. He then stays there reading the books from the library. Sometime later, Curtis finally manages to see a doctor and explains that he's been having trouble sleeping for 4 days. At first, the doctor thinks it's no big deal, but Curtis also tells him about the nightmares, admitting that he wet the bed and that he still feels the pain from the dog bite. The doctor agrees to give him medication for a few days and tells him to see a psychiatrist in Columbus. Meanwhile, Samantha visits the insurance agency to ask about the operation to restore Han's hearing. Fortunately, her request is approved, and all expenses will be covered because Curtis's job offers a very good policy. At the same time, Curtis goes to the pharmacy to pick up his medication and is surprised to learn that he doesn't have to pay much thanks to his insurance. That night, the family has a wonderful dinner together as they celebrate the good news. But Curtis doesn't tell them about the medication. As he gets ready for bed, Samantha is already making plans for the vacation since they no longer have to worry about the money. Curtis takes the medication secretly in the bathroom. The next morning, Curtis wakes up feeling well rested, and Samantha notices he also looks healthier. However, at work, Curtis is still talking with Duarte about the right amount of food for a shelter. Suddenly, they start hearing thunder in the sky, although it's still clear. He asks Duarte, but he doesn't hear anything. Then, Curtis panics and runs to a dumpster to vomit, fighting a panic attack. Curtis leaves work and starts having trouble breathing while driving, so he stops the car to regain control. When he finally calms down, he notices a place that sells shipping containers and buys one to expand the shelter. Moments later, Curtis visits his mother, who is acting strangely because she is heavily medicated. It is revealed that she developed paranoid schizophrenia at the same age Curtis is now. He is worried that the same thing is happening to him and tries to ask her some questions, but she doesn't remember much from those stressful years. Then, Curtis calls his doctor to explain that he can't drive to Columbus to see a psychiatrist, so he asks for an alternative. That night, he calculates how much it would cost to transform the shelter into a complete bunker. The next morning, he goes to the bank and applies for a home improvement loan without telling his wife and ignoring people's warnings. Later at work, Curtis asks Duarte for help because he wants to take some equipment from work to build his bunker. This is against the rules, but Duarte agrees to help him. Worried, Duarte also asks if Curtis is okay, and Curtis assures him that he is. After work, Curtis goes to see a local counselor and lays out all his theories based on the research he's done. The woman explains that she is just a counselor, so she can't diagnose him or prescribe anything. But they can talk, so she can guide him through his crisis. Curtis starts talking about his mother, who one day left the family, and his father had to raise him and his brother. Later, she was found eating trash from a dumpster, and they had to commit her to a state hospital. Curtis also begins to talk about his dreams. That night, the family goes to another school meeting. On the way back, Curtis stops the car because he is seeing a lot of lightning in the sky. However, his family is still asleep, and no other driver reacts, which makes him worry more about his mental health. On Saturday, while Samantha and Han are at the market, Curtis and Duarte start working on the shelter. When Samantha arrives and sees everything, she gets upset and starts an argument. Samantha becomes even more furious when she hears that Curtis took out a loan and screams, demanding an explanation for all his strange decisions lately, like locking up Red. However, Curtis says there's nothing to explain and leaves the room to check on Han while Samantha has a breakdown. That night, Curtis takes more medication than he should. In the middle of the night, Samantha wakes up to find Curtis having a seizure and bleeding beside her. She immediately calls an ambulance, ignoring Curtis when he says it's not necessary. Moments after the paramedics leave, Curtis finally tells Samantha everything. He swears he is going to the counselor frequently because he doesn't want to leave his family as his mother did. The next day, Curtis and Samantha take Han to the hospital for a checkup, and her surgery is scheduled for 6 weeks later. At work, Curtis goes to see his boss and asks for Duarte to be removed from his team because he doesn't want to give orders to his best friend. Jim finds this strange but agrees, before pointing out that Curtis has missed a lot of work. Curtis explains it's due to Han's doctor visits, but Jim gives him a warning. After work, Curtis goes to a store to buy gas masks, which turn out to be very expensive. Meanwhile, Dewart's wife tells Samantha about the rumors regarding Curtis's behavior, but Samantha gets defensive and swears they are fine. Sometime later, Curtis is working on the shelter when his brother Kyle shows up, worried about the strange things he heard from Samantha. Kyle is concerned about Curtis's health, but Curtis insists he's fine and tells Kyle to visit their mother. It's clear the brothers have a somewhat strange relationship. Before leaving, Curtis remembers he was looking for a dog and asks Kyle to take Red. On a rainy afternoon, Curtis enters the kitchen and finds Samantha soaked from the rain. They look at each other for a moment before she considers picking up a knife. However, this is another dream. During breakfast, Curtis can't shake the strange feeling from the dream, and when Samantha tries to touch his hand, he pulls it away. At that moment, they notice Jim waiting outside. Curtis runs to meet him and hears horrible news. Jim found out about the equipment Curtis took and lied about, and he fires him, leaving him with only 2 more weeks of health insurance. Dewart was also suspended without pay for 2 weeks for helping Curtis. When Curtis tells Samantha the news, she slaps him before leaving the room with Han. Later, Curtis goes to see his counselor and finds out she has been transferred, and there is a new counselor. This new counselor wants to start from the beginning, but Curtis can't bear to talk about his mother again and lose all his progress, so he leaves without a word. Curtis returns to the shelter and continues working on it. Meanwhile, Samantha keeps mending neighbors' clothes to earn extra money, but it's not enough, and she has to take out the rest of the vacation savings. That night, Samantha talks to Curtis, who explains that his fright was due to a dream and takes her hand to show he's trying to get better. Samantha announces they will cancel the beach trip and use Curtis's last paycheck to cover 2 months of bills. She will postpone Han's surgery, and they both need to focus on getting jobs. Samantha is willing to work on their problems, but sets the condition that Curtis must go to a real psychiatrist. She also wants him to attend the school dinner on the weekend to work on his isolation. On the night of the event, Curtis is confronted by Dewart, who blames him for the work suspension. Curtis tries to ask him to talk in private later, but Dewart keeps complaining that Curtis pushed him away when they should be friends. Dewart even pushes and hits Curtis, who responds with a kick. Finally, Curtis explodes and throws a table to the ground, announcing that a devastating storm is coming and that no one is prepared for it. He then has a breakdown, and Samantha takes the opportunity to take him home. Sometime later, Curtis sees Han in the middle of the road and runs to pick her up. At that moment, a flock of birds appears in the sky and flies in strange patterns before heading towards Curtis. He protects Han as the birds fly over them. They then form another strange pattern before starting to fall dead to the ground. Terrified, Curtis runs inside the house as a siren starts to sound. At that moment, he wakes up and discovers the siren is sounding for real. It's raining very heavily, so Curtis takes his family and runs to hide in the shelter. After locking the door, Curtis has everyone put on oxygen masks as a precaution. They then fall asleep and wait for the storm to pass. A few hours later, Curtis wakes up and checks the door but still feels the storm outside and goes back to sleep. In the morning, Samantha wakes him up, asking him to open the door because the storm is over. Curtis disagrees and says he can still hear it. He also has Samantha touch the door so she can feel it. However, Samantha doesn't hear or feel anything. Panicking, Curtis backs away and refuses to open the door, offering the key to his wife. Samantha refuses to take it because doing so would only delay the problem, and Curtis needs to face his fears. Wanting to be good for his family, Curtis gathers his courage and finally opens the door to find a beautiful sunny day. The neighbors are fine and cleaning up the debris left by the storm. Sometime later, Samantha finally takes Curtis to the psychiatrist. The doctor agrees to give Curtis more medication immediately and decides he needs time away from the shelter. He tells the family to take a few days off to rest and prepare, as Curtis will need to be sent to a specialized facility until he recovers. This means he won't see his family for a while. The next day, the family is at the beach. Curtis and Han are making a sandcastle when suddenly Han signs the word storm while pointing at the sea. Samantha comes out and discovers that it's raining oil. At that moment, the whole family sees a huge dark storm approaching in the distance, and Curtis turns to Samantha, who nods to confirm that she is seeing it too, leaving in doubt whether his dreams were a premonition or if his mental illness has also affected his wife.